Speaker, it's a pleasure to speak in this debate this afternoon. The title of this report and the title of the inquiry was the Inquiry into the Tobacco Industry in Aotearoa and the Consequences of Tobacco Use for Maori. And although those of us on the committee, and yes, despite my fair complexion, I did get to spend time on the committee for this inquiry, and I appreciate the fact that members of the committee gave me the opportunity to do so. The focus that we had to remind ourselves regularly was on the tobacco industry, because we all know why we have to curtail smoking prevalence in New Zealand. It is because it kills between 4,500 and 5,000 New Zealanders every year. It is because it shortens lifespans in New Zealand. It is because it affects Maori more than it affects Pākehā, and therefore has an inequitable effect across the population of New Zealand. And the responsibility for all of those things lies squarely with the tobacco industry, and that is where the focus of this inquiry had to lie. And the previous speaker raised the issue of personal responsibility, and we have heard from a number of people throughout this debate that if people took more personal responsibility for themselves, they would not smoke or they would quit, and the government has no place in trying to stop them from starting or indeed to support them in quitting. Well, that concept completely overlooks the factor that addiction brings in with any drug, but particularly with tobacco. Tobacco kills around 5,000 people every year. On that statistic alone, it actually makes it the most dangerous drug in New Zealand. I know we could argue about alcohol, we could argue about other drugs and the effects they have on our communities, but in terms of the number of people killed in New Zealand every year, tobacco is the most dangerous drug. And around 80% of people want to quit, but they can't because of their addiction. So we have to forget this argument about personal responsibility. Most people start smoking when they are too young to make a rational, sensible decision. By the time they have decided that they want to quit, it is too late. They cannot do it on their own, and we here in the New Zealand Parliament need to bring measures into place that stop people from taking up smoking in the first place, but also support people to quit smoking when they make that decision, when they take that personal responsibility to get themselves away from tobacco. And that's why we on the opposition benches thoroughly support this inquiry. It is a continuation of years of effort. And in fact, if people look at Appendix D in this report, they will see a history of the tobacco control measures that have been taken in New Zealand, and various governments over the years have taken a systematic approach to trying to reduce the normality, reduce the acceptability of tobacco smoking in New Zealand. We've done it by taking it out of workplaces, taking it out of bars and restaurants, getting rid of the advertising, getting rid of sponsorship of sport, which just seems the most ridiculous thing, that we'd have a drug that kills half the people who use it, sponsoring something that is supposed to be a healthy activity like sport. So over the years, these things have occurred, and we have seen the prevalence of smoking and the number of cigarettes smoked in New Zealand each year drop. What this report says, and I think and it is admirable, is that we need to step that effort up. And it has actually provided us a date for an end game. This report says by 2025, New Zealand should be smoke-free or as close to being smoke-free as possible. And I'd just like to dwell on that question, because most submitters who came to the Select Committee said that actually that date should be 2020. And for good reasons. I mean, 5 years sooner, absolutely, we would like to see that rate cut 5 years sooner. But the committee did go for 2025 simply because we think it is a more viable prospect. And in fact, it actually is more incumbent on Parliament and on successive governments to achieve that date of 2025. 2020 could easily have been dismissed as ambitious but non-binding and not really a goal that we ever intended to meet. 2025, we absolutely intend to meet that goal through a range of means: banning tobacco displays, introducing plain packaging, getting rid of the last of those sponsorships through exclusive supply arrangements that still exist at events like Rhythm and Vines and the fashion shows, cutting back on the additives and restricting the additives, being more open with tobacco users about what additives are actually in there, and having a target on Māori who are disproportionately affected so that they too get down to being at a zero rate or as close to it as possible by 2025. That necessitates a target on Māori because their rates are so much higher than Pākehā.
I regret to advise the member that his time has expired.